Before we begin, we'd like to mention that this episode of the Muslim Minds podcast has been brought to you by DC Muslim Youth. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode of Muslim Minds, a podcast where we aim to inspire and empower young Muslims by sharing stories of successful individuals who have found success in their professional lives while remaining grounded in their Islamic faith and values. I'm your host, Muhammad Ibrahim, and in today's episode, we're joined by a special guest who has worked in the community for many years, moving from one organization to another, where he used to work at Islamic Relief on their marketing team, Makespace as a program coordinator, and now works at Kahwa as a programs director. With his expertise in developing events and programs to bring people in the Muslim community together, we are excited to have Omar Nassimi join us on this episode. Without further ado, let's get started. So, thank you for being here. Before we get started,
thank you for having me. Yeah.
We have an icebreaker from our previous guest that they wanted to ask you. They didn't know it was you, and we're gonna do this at the end as well, and you're not gonna know who the next guest is. But their question for you was, what's the most memorable gift you've ever received?
Wow. No, there's one that comes to mind immediately, which is a friend of mine, Jamal. I think it was my birthday or something. I think it was a birthday. He gave me a pencil that was in the shape of a bullet. It was like the whole thing was like, it was a bullet about this big, it was like an AK-47 bullet, but it was lead. Mm-hmm. So it was like when you write with it, the more you write with it, like the bullet gets smaller and smaller and disappears. So it was by this artist. I don't remember his name, but the idea is like, it's this metaphor for like, instead of violence, you're choosing to write. Yeah. You're choosing to do something creative. And the more you create, the smaller the bullet gets. So I was like, wow, that was a really cool gift.
Do you still have the pencil?
I have it somewhere in my house. Yeah. Unfortunately, it was terrible. He gave it to me, and literally, as I was opening it, I dropped it, and it broke.
Oh wow! Oh no!
So it's like in two pieces, but I still have it. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm guessing there's a half of it that you haven't used yet, right?
Yeah. So there's like the top half of it is only usable. The bottom half is just like a square, so it's hard to write with, but. Yeah, but it was really cool. It was a very memorable gift, and a lot of symbolic.
That's very true. That's great. I mean, I don't want to see that because I can't envision it right now in my head, but I can see what you mean. It was like big, or was it like an actual bullet?
Big. So it was this big, so you can hold it.
Yeah,
it was it looks like an actual bullet, but the whole thing is like a lead piece. So in the very tip of it is like you just start writing, and then it writes like lead.
But you sharpen it every once in a while, or
it by itself, just like when you write, it kind of like.
Also, the entire bullet is just made out of lead. Oh, okay, that makes more sense. Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I'm probably gonna search it up and see if I can find something like that and see what it looks like.
It was very cool, man.
Okay, well, now let's dive into some deeper questions. Can you share with us how you've reached the position you've reached right now, like your journey, what you're doing right now, and basically, just a general journey, where you grew up, what school you went to, things like that. Things that are like
important. It's a long story, but I was born in Chicago, lived briefly. My parents lived there at the time, and then lived briefly in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. My dad was working there, and then so I learned Arabic from a young age. My dad was always very interested in pursuing Islamic knowledge. So he was always very involved in community work and studying. He ended up doing his PhD in Islam. So he's kind of like an imam in the community. So I was always kind of around masajid, Muslim community stuff from when I was a kid. When I was 6, we moved to Virginia, and been there ever since in Herndon. So in the Adams community. Although back then when we moved here in '99, it was a very small masjid in it was in the second floor of an office building in Herndon. So now it's mashallah like this. Yeah. One of the biggest meshes in the country. But back then it was like this office floor. So went to a bunch of different Muslim schools because my dad was like, you would really want me to put me in a Muslim school. Mm-hmm. But at the time, the closest one that was a school that he liked was Al Huda in Maryland, College Park. So Herndon to College Park is about 50 miles. Oh, wow. 45 miles, 50 miles without traffic. So every morning I'd get up 6 a.m., 5 a.m. I was in second grade. So he'd ship me out to Al Huda every morning. Yeah. And then second and third grade I was there. Fourth and fifth grade I went to Washington Islamic Academy. Yeah. Over in
Etzel Road?
Yeah, now it's in Etzel Road. Yeah. Back then it was where the Waterford is in Springfield, near Springfield Mall.
I think
so. It's Al Qalam is there now. So
yeah.
So that building, the bottom floor used to be WIA, and the top floor used to be Qalam. So I went to Wash Islamic Academy, and then went to an Adam Center. I had a homeschool, so I was there. And then so my dad was like every year he'd find like this new school,
Yeah.
and like he'd send me to like this school, this try school, because we
Yeah,
were trying
yeah.
to figure out at the time there wasn't any schools in our area
Mhm.
in Sterling. So yeah, so I went to a bunch of different schools. I went to public school, then went to college. Went to Nova Community College, and then went to
Mhm.
George Mason. So I kind of had this. Even by then, like I had a full gamut of the Muslim community.
Yeah.
Just by growing up here, like lived in Adam Center area. My dad was like very involved in Mustafa Center,
Mhm.
Al Hijra, a lot of the masajid in the area. And I went to school in Maryland and like this whole area. So I was just kind of always involved in the Muslim community from when I
Yeah.
was a kid, just by virtue of being my dad. He'd always like, I remember he'd take me to all these meetings he's having, like planning meetings and
Yeah.
strategy meetings and stuff. And I was sitting there, I was like 8 years old. I didn't care about what it was like, it was kind of boring. But now I realized it was very interesting, like being in that environment constantly, because
Yeah.
it just made me used to it.
Yeah.
But at that time, yeah, it was quite boring. But ended up, so I went to college, majored in religious studies, and then also studied English lit.
Mhm.
And then because I was just very interested about like ideas of the world,
Yeah.
and how things come to be. So literature for me was like, it's a documentation of like different ideas in different time periods and how people lived in different time periods.
Yeah.
So that was very interesting. So I studied lit, and then also religion, because religious studies for me was like I wanted to study how other people study religion. So the
Mhm.
Western Academy, how they do that. And then graduated, I worked at Islamic Relief for a couple of years, part of their marketing team.
Yeah.
And then I worked at Makespace, running programs for them. And then now I'm at Qahwa, Adam Center, running programs there.
So you've been very involved with the community, and I'm guessing that's because your father and your dad kind of, you were there with him since you were young, and that kind of like got you into it. But is there another reason why you decided to go down the community organizing route? Because you could have done whatever you wanted in college, but you decided to like stick through with that, do the Islamic studies, the religion studies.
It's a good question, man. I mean, it's very like, it's not as like I'm saying it in a kind of clear narrative, but it never felt that way. Like growing up, I always felt this kind of like what I would describe as like a calling.
Yeah.
A calling to serve, like a calling to be a part of something, especially within the Muslim community.
Yeah.
I didn't know what that was. I only very recently, like within the past like year, I'm just turned 30.
Yeah.
I mean, I turned 30 in November, but like I've only very recently figured out what that is. So even when I'm working here at all these different institutions, it just kind of happened. Like there's an opportunity that was presented to me at Islamic Relief. They offered me a job, or they told me to come and apply for a job because I knew the marketing director, and he was like, I knew him personally, and he was like, I think you'd be good for this role. I was like, okay, so like I went and applied.
Yeah.
And then at Makespace too, it was like I was just helping them out as a volunteer, and then they were like, why don't you come work with us? And run programs. I was like, okay, like,
why not?
Same thing with Qahwa. Like they kind of like, I was there working as a barista, like at the coffee shop. And then they were like, we need a programs person. Can you run programs? And I was like, so for me, it was never really that intentional. I mean, I've always wanted to be involved in the Muslim community. I've always felt this sense of like love for being in a community space. Like growing up in Adam Center, we were very lucky in the sense that we're the only masajid that had like a gym. So I remember like, I mean, back then there's a lot more now, but like in high school, like having a basketball gym was like huge. And for me, like all my friends were there. Like I remember Saturdays, like Saturday school, we'd go from like 10 a.m. to like 2 p.m. We had Saturday school, and I'd be there the whole day. We'd be there to like 11 p.m. midnight, just playing ball. Like we'd go up to the 7-Eleven up the street. We'd like scrounge together like $5 between 10 of us and like try to like get Gatorades and stuff.
Yeah.
So it was just really fun, man. Like for me, I loved that atmosphere of like belonging. And then in high school, also I got to participate in MIST, which is a lot of people might know, the Muslim Middle School Wrestling Tournament, where like you make a team with your high schoolers and you go compete against other Muslim high schools. So I just love that atmosphere of belonging, of community. It was just really fun.
Yeah.
And at the time, like in high school and college, I didn't really think about career. I just wanted to
have fun.
Like it was just fun to me. Like when I was outside the Muslim community, it just felt very boring. Like me personally, even in high school, like I didn't really have a lot of friends outside the Muslim community. In high school, it was like I was kind of a loner. I didn't really have a lot of friends. But I went to Adams like on the weekends or at nights playing ball. Like all my friends were there. So I was like, great. So for me, I always just felt this drawn, like this calling that I had to serve, but then always this kind of wanting to be close to the community in some kind of context. And then just being around people, you just kind of develop like passions and interests. And like I always loved events. Yeah. I'd always like at college or different stuff that would happen in the public, like this fundraiser would be happening or that like lecture would be happening about this or that, or conventions. Like I'd always go to ISNA and ICNA. And like my parents would take me to that. So I always just loved being in the event atmosphere. I never really thought of it as a career. It always was just something that's like fun.
Yeah.
And so running programs and stuff, and so slowly but surely, like I just got into different things, and then I just kept being around the community so much and doing it. You just kind of find opportunities to do things. So
Yeah.
but yeah, it was never intentional. I've always wanted to do something. I don't know what it was, but it just slowly developed like that.
I mean, honestly, that sense of community kind of plays a role for a lot of people where they do things just to be a part of the community because they can't find that in like other aspects of their life, like whether that be work or school or college. Just going to the masjid and having that community. I think whether you like it or not, you will be involved with like the organization because you're and like the organizing of stuff because you're there all the time and you kind of just like fall into it, and it's not something
Right.
that it's like that you I want to be this and this and this. It just kind of happens just because you're there all the time and all this type of stuff. But yeah.
Yeah, I agree. You don't really like my dad, for example, like he was an engineer, like so he worked a lot in the Muslim community as like a volunteer kind of imam. But it was like a side job. And
Mhm.
most of the people I knew growing up, like I remember growing up in this kind of circuit of all these organizers of all these different masajid, because my dad would always take me all this stuff. None of them were full time. No, they all had like day jobs.
Yeah.
They're all like doctors, lawyers, engineers, etc. during the day, and at night and on the weekends they'd be like helping out in the community,
Mhm.
doing events and running Saturday school, or like doing some qiyam for the kids. Or
Yeah.
so it was very new, this concept of like working for the community full time.
Mhm.
Even now it's very new. Like very few people do it. Most people are kind of either volunteers or doing it. So yeah, there wasn't really like a model. I saw people who were maybe like imams,
Mhm.
and that was it. Like if you're an
It was
imam,
ever
it could be
paid.
full time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, even growing up, I was like, okay, maybe if I want to do service to the Muslim community, like I have to become an imam.
Yeah.
And for a while, I did want to do that. One of the reasons I studied religion is because like I wanted to maybe like go down, maybe do a PhD, and then like study my traditional knowledge and then give back that way. But now there's so many more opportunities, which has become really interesting. Like you could do marketing, you could like set up events, run programs. You
Yeah.
can become like a volunteer coordinator. You can do finances for a masjid. Like there's just a lot of different ways now. The market is diversified a lot. Institutions have also grown a lot bigger.
Yeah.
So masjids like Adam Center or like Darul Hijra or like a lot of local masajid, mass or somewhere, they do have like resources
Mhm.
that they can try to start investing in people to try to build up the community.
Yeah.
So that's been nice. Alhamdulillah. Like it now actually is like somewhat of a viable career.
Yeah.
It's still very rare. Like I don't know what, like if I were to try to replicate myself, if I were to give someone in college or somebody advice about how to get here, I really don't know.
Really? It's just
kind of
Just be there.
kind of you have to keep showing up. Like
Yeah,
if you
yeah.
just keep showing up to stuff. Even now, like a couple, we have like a large volunteer team.
yeah.
And the people that end up running a lot of the stuff, whether it be marketing, whether it be logistics, they're just people who are there.
All the time.
Yeah, they're just there all the time. And
Yeah,
like
yeah.
to come to our events. And then you start talking to them, and then they start asking questions like, "Oh, why'd you do this way? Why'd you do this
Yeah.
that way?" And then you're like, "Oh, do you want to help out and do this?" You're like, "Yeah," and then they just start doing it. So that's kind of how it happens. But yeah, I don't remember what the question was.
Yeah.
We just kinda went off
that
on a
was
tangent.
good. It was about working in the community and how like why you chose to do that, but
Yeah, it wasn't really. I mean, again, it
wasn't
was
really
like
a choice,
a
it
calling.
just happened.
It just kind of happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even now to this day, like this job at Kahul is like very recent within the
Mhm.
past year. And then before that, I was like, I didn't see it as a viable option, like as a career. I
Yeah.
always saw it as like, okay, I have to go get my PhD, maybe go teach at university or something,
Yeah.
and then maybe like write books or do
Professor
something.
by day, organizer by night.
Yeah, or like get like an IT job or something, which is what a lot of people do.
Yeah.
And then like a lot of the board members and stuff at Adams, a lot of masajid, they have day jobs.
Yeah.
Like they have regular stuff that they do to feed their families. And then at night and weekends and stuff, they'll coordinate. So yeah, it's like, it's still, most organizations don't have the capacity to pay people full time.
Yeah, that's very true.
So it's still becoming, it's a tough thing, but alhamdulillah, we're growing.
Okay, I think we're gonna break for us right now,
Okay.
and then we'll come back afterwards.
Alright.
Inshallah. If you're enjoying Muslim Minds so far and you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe, whether it be on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any other platform you're listening to. Take a moment to subscribe. We'll remind you when we upload episodes so you never miss an episode of Muslim Minds. Again, so take a moment, hit that subscribe, and let's get right back into the episode. And we're back. I know, you always gotta break for prayer. You know?
Yes, sir.
But yeah, so like you mentioned earlier, you've worked for in like numerous organizations, Islamic Relief, Make Space, and now Kahwa. Can you share some of those challenges that you faced while working in the nonprofit sector?
Oh
primarily?
man, there's so many.
Which one's that, like the first one that comes to mind?
It's not really something like, honestly, it's very difficult to predict. So you can see the trajectory of how things are going. But for example, like if I were to come and say, okay, I want to map out my career in the nonprofit world, helping people for the next 20 years, it's very difficult to do that. One, because it's very subject to a lot of market forces. So market forces being like, you know, economic catastrophes, but also just the community itself. Because working in the nonprofit space, in the Muslim community in particular, and this is not just nonprofits in general, because all my experiences in the Muslim community, when you're in a Muslim community, you're at the subject of the leadership of the Muslim community. And so that a lot of times comes with its own challenges. And you can choose to see that as like a challenge or as an opportunity. For me, I always saw it as an opportunity. But for example, like if the leadership of the Muslim community right now, for a long time, they didn't really believe in hiring youth directors like at Masajid. They wanted like an imam, and the imam is like, they might get like volunteers to do youth stuff. They might like get a Sunday school teacher, Saturday school teacher, but they wouldn't really, there was no appetite or interest in hiring full-time youth people. Now there's a lot more. So if I wanted to be like, do this kind of work that I want to do right now programmatically 10 years ago, it's not possible.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think there's been that change in the
Well, there's a couple of
dialogue?
things. One, it's because the community's expanded tremendously. Like if you go to any Tarawih right now, any location, it's packed. Ramadan. Any Jummah you go to is packed. Like even though the rates of people going to the masajid has not necessarily changed, but the community itself has expanded so much. There's so many new people from moving from overseas, people like having families and growing, etc.
Yeah.
So the community's expanded a lot, and because the community's expanded a lot, that also comes with challenges, right? So now a lot of the families are seeing their kids struggle, deal with anxiety, depression, suicide, drug abuse, all kinds of stuff. So, and then the imams and the leadership of the masjid community, they're the ones who are having to deal with a lot of this stuff, right? Because people from their community coming to them and saying, our youth are struggling.
Yeah.
Our youth, all kinds of problems. So when the community expands, the problems also expand. And so I think that's becoming very paramount, especially post-COVID. I think after COVID, there's a huge, like, people just feel it. There's like something's different, right? Something's in the air that people are like, the community is just different itself. There's a different need that people have, a spiritual need, a social need. People are feeling really lonely, very disconnected. That's parents too, not just like young people, but it's like parents, young people, families, children, everyone's just going through it.
Yeah.
So because of that need that's like everywhere, like COVID happened everywhere simultaneously. So that like completely shifted the entire narrative and the nature of like communities now are much more willing to invest in like resources for youth. Not everywhere.
Yeah.
But I'm just seeing it more so. Like even myself, like the opportunity now I have at Adams Center probably wouldn't have existed 5 years ago, 3 years ago, even 2 years ago. Like pre-COVID, none of these opportunities would have existed.
I think that's because COVID kind of, since everyone was home, everyone was like by themselves, that sense of community was lost, even though people weren't really recognizing it from before. That like Friday prayer, that Tarawih, things like that, they took it for granted. And then when it got taken away, they're like, oh, like people really felt something missing. So when it came back, everyone just like really wants to get back there, really wants to build that community again and kind of revive that part of their life and their heart that is there for socializing and for being with other people and all this type of stuff.
I agree.
But yeah, no, that's definitely
so it's COVID was a huge factor, but also just again the market. Like there are just certain things that like the community just changes over time.
Yeah.
For example, like one of the things that's happened politically in the past like a while, past 10 years or so, maybe longer than that, which is like the entire like American community, American people have shifted so dramatically to the left politically that even the people who were on like very conservative, even those people got shifted more to the left.
Yeah.
So even conservatism itself has changed. So for example, like there's a lot of masajid that I know of in this area that you never see men and women in the same space. Now you go to an event like a lecture that's happening about whatever, Sahih Bukhari or Muslim or something, you go and there's men and women like in the same room. That never used to happen. Or you see like even masajid have like, I saw like a wedding that happened in a masjid that was a very conservative masjid, but they had like the tabla and they had like the you know what I'm saying? Like that never would have like even and men and women sitting in the same wedding gathering. I never would have saw that 5-10 years ago. So even like and it's not like these communities have become less religious.
Yeah.
That's not what's happened. But instead, the social norms in like American popular culture itself have changed to what it means to be conservative, what it means to be practicing.
Yeah.
So those shifts as well have made a lot of the institutions now more open to different kinds of things, right? They want different kinds of programming. They want different kinds of events and activities. You know, everyone wants to be on social media now. Everyone wants to have like every institution now wants to have like reels. You know?
Yeah.
Like, so it's like a lot of these needs that every institution has, now they're like looking for people to fill those needs.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So like 5 years ago, if I was in the same space wanting to do the same thing, it would have been much more difficult. And I would have had to do it like as a volunteer or part-time. But it's just because of just the world has changed.
Yeah.
And that world is changing has made it different, which is why like my original point was that it's very hard to predict. It's very hard to know 5 years from now, 10 years from now.
I was just about to ask, what do you think it's going to be like in 5 years, 10 years?
So for the Muslim community in particular, I think right now is the boom.
Really?
Right now. If you are somebody who's like looking to do community work full time, now's the time. Like, because the market again is shifting, that institutions want to hire people, and there's very few people who are qualified to do it. Qualified, I mean, you have to be good with people.
Yeah.
You have to know how to design a program. You have to know how to interact with like community elders. You have to know how to do your own marketing. So that's part of the challenges of working in the nonprofit space is you have to have a lot of skills simultaneously for very little pay.
Yeah.
Like if you can take one of those skills like marketing and then do
Really
it for corporate and make a lot of money.
That's very true.
But or like do technical stuff, you know, programmatic stuff and like work for some kind of corporate entity or government and make a ton of money, right? But at the nonprofit space, you're having to do multiple jobs for like a portion of the salary. So that's part of the challenge. And it also requires you to be like very multi-dimensional, but there's also opportunity there. Like I have a boss, but I'm pretty much my own boss.
Yeah.
Like I work in a masjid, so like I used to hate waking up in the mornings. I don't have to wake up in the mornings anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I make my own schedule. Like, alhamdulillah. Like, and there's a trade-off. Like I have to work most nights and weekends. Like this weekend I have 3 events.
Wow.
Saturday and Sunday, so I have no time for anything social with my friends. So that trade-off is
but
like
your friends are at the masjid, so
sometimes. So there's like this trade-off, right? So like alhamdulillah, like I have a lot more freedom and flexibility in the mornings, but a lot of my meetings, a lot of my like night times are in meetings because a lot of the volunteers, staff, organizers, they have day jobs, so they can only meet at night or weekends. So like all my nights and weekends I'm working.
Yeah.
During the day I'm like I have a lot more time. I'm planning and stuff, but that works for me. But again, there's a lot of people who have families who like want just a normal life schedule that you just can't. Like you have to work nights and weekends if you want to do this kind of work.
Yeah.
Unless you're working like, you know, Islamic Relief or somewhere where it's 9 to 5. It's like it's a kind of a corporate job. But even that has a lot of weekends. But if you want to do it like masjid community work, yeah, for sure. It's like nights and weekends. So there's a trade-off.
Oh, that transitions right into our next thing is what advice do you have for young Muslims that are interested in pursuing community leadership or organizing and like just, and growing?
I would say like 3 things, just right off the top of my head. Maybe it'll become 4 by the time I get to 3. But number 1 is like you have to develop your skills. I think this is something that a lot of, for me personally, when I was growing up and even now, people don't really paying enough attention to, which is you have to really develop what you can do and be really good at what you can do. So I have like I taught myself how to market, like how to do graphics, how to do video, etc., photography. And that was actually what got me my first job at Islamic Relief. Because the marketing director, who I know personally, but like I showed him my Instagram and I showed him a couple of videos I made. And he was like, oh, okay, like this kid can do something. I think a lot of people have this attitude of like, they want to come to an organization and they just want to do everything. They want to be given power. They want to be given authority. They want to be given responsibility and just be able to do whatever they want. It's like, no, first you have to prove it. First you have to show like, these are my skills.
You have to be there. You have to show up.
You have to, so that's number 2 I was going to say. Number 1 is like skills. Like, what is it? You have to show, boom, I can do this. I can do marketing programs. I can do volunteer management. I can do like accounting, whatever. Like you have to have a range of skill set. And when you're young, especially like high school, college, post-college, you have time. In that time, like you should be really developing your skill set. Like I can really run a podcast. I can really do video lighting. I can like edit, like build those skills, and skills will pay you your money. So number 2 is just showing up, like consistency. All of the jobs that I've got I didn't apply for. Every one of them, alhamdulillah, to this point has been because I had a really good relationship with somebody who worked at that organization, and I was doing something for free.
Yeah.
Like I was just showing up, doing something, and then they asked me, hey, do you want to do this?
You weren't going in with the plan that, eventually they're going to ask me to work with them. You're just there just because you want to be there.
Yeah, that's number 3.
Yeah.
You have to love it. Like
Yeah.
you have to care about this kind of stuff. You know what I mean? Like this kind of work, nonprofit work, community work, messenger work, people don't do it because of the money. They don't do it because of some people might do it because of the fame or the, you know, the kind of notoriety, social media following, etc. But that's not my world. I mean, my world is like, you have to do it because you love it. Like you really have to love people. You have to love the community. You have to love bringing people together. It brings you like a certain joy when you see somebody like, you know, come into the masjid or come into whatever organization you work at. They were at a certain place and then you help them get to another place.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's like nonprofit community development, if you're like, you know, someone's struggling with housing, someone's struggling with paying their bills, someone's struggling with their family, addiction, whatever.
Yeah.
There's a series of issues that people have. You really have to care about people that you really want to get them from where they are to help them get to a better place.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, like, I just love that, man. I love being with people. I love like my community. I really like all day and night. That's all I want to do is just be with people. So for me, like, so those are the 3 things for me is like, number 1, like skills. You got to have the skills to do what you want to do. 2 is like time, like showing up. Like you just have to be there. And then the leadership and people will see that. Those kids always here, man. Like, you know what I mean? Like even you and I, like the way we ran into each other, because I just met you at Adams, at Adams, and I was like, oh, and then we started connecting. So you were there, you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of people who have opinions and just voices from like Twitter or like Instagram, just posting stuff, talking about stuff online. Oh, the message should be this way. Oh, that should be that way. Oh, this. I've consistently found people who are the loudest, you never see.
Yeah.
People who are actually like in there doing work make impact. If you actually want to make impact, just show up. Like if you show up,
it's easy to judge from the outside looking in when you don't understand what the community needs and all this type of stuff.
Exactly. If you show up, if you want to make change, just show up. Show up consistently, and the thing that you want eventually probably will happen.
Yeah.
Like it might take 10 years, it might take like 5 years, but like consistency, you show up, it'll happen. And number 3 is just like, what did I say number 3 was?
It was
showing up, skills, and then there was a third.
Loving it.
Love it. Like, yeah, you have to like do this with a sense of purpose and passion and intentionality that like you want something. You have to have a vision. Right? Like I want to create a deep sense of belonging for Muslims within Muslim institutions.
Yeah.
That's my goal. Like I want people to not feel lonely, depressed, anxious, or have any kind of internal, spiritual, emotional issues in the Muslim community. That's my goal. So I'm going to go about creating events, programming, marketing, etc., that fosters a sense of belonging and fosters like a sense of wholeness within people. So now that I have that vision, again, skills and showing up, right? You do work on your skills and work on consistently showing up. And then that's what like really creates change. It's like just consistently doing it over time.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that is, I think that works for a lot of aspects of life.
Yeah.
That consistency, just being there and always doing it, eventually it will pay off. Whether it's like money, whether it's you becoming a leader and you doing the thing that you love, eventually it will show up. And like for example, with going to the gym, if you consistently go into the gym, eventually you get the body that you want. And if you don't, you're being healthy, and there's also like other benefits to it. But yeah, consistently showing up kind of like helps you build that. Whether like even if you don't get to the position that you want,
exactly,
you've still built that community around you. You've still built those friends and relationships that will hopefully last a lifetime.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's key, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even like this current job at Qahwa, the way I got the job actually was Naeem, who was like a friend and also like my manager at Islamic Relief. I worked under him. He was tagged when Adam Center started at Qahwa. Naeem was like helping them build the coffee side of it. So he put out like something on his Instagram. He was like, hey, we need baristas to come work at Qahwa. And I just went in there making $10, $11 an hour as a barista because I was just trying to help Naeem. And it was also like, that's the community that I grew up in at Adams. So I was like, why not? Like, let me just go have fun, like learn how to make good coffee, like learn how to make like the latte art and like, which I'm okay at. I'm not very good, but like, and then also just like be there with the people. Like I want to be part of this project. And working there, I saw that they were starting to do some events. And then like the people who were doing the events there reached out to me, like the kind of founders of Kahwa, because they knew that I had done programming work at Makespace. And so like, we have an opening, like we have a need. Why don't you do this? And I was like, nah, man, like I already did that. Like I was burnt out a little bit at that point. I just wanted to do something different. Like I was in grad school, I was thinking about going to do my PhD. Like I was like, I need a break from community work. And I want to do something more kind of developmental for myself, take some time. And I was just doing barista just like to have fun. But then they kept asking me, and eventually like I was the only one applied for the position.
Yeah.
Because no one else wanted to do anything in that kind of world. And also had a good relationship with the masjid, and they knew me, they knew my family. So it's like, it just kind of happened because I showed up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's the whole point, is like, I loved it. I wanted to do something for my community. And I did it for a while before the actual opportunity ended up presenting itself much later, like several months later. And that was never my goal.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, if you do something with a level of vision and intentionality because you really care about something. I really cared about that institution. I really cared about doing something good and beneficial that would help the institution. And I want to be part of creating that change. And then the rest of it just happened.
Yeah.
But,
going a little bit deeper in Kahwa, I think a lot of people out there don't understand what Kahwa is and what they're trying to do. And, you know, we can just take a minute to just kind of clear the air, because, I mean, like, we were talking about this a few weeks ago when I was at the facilitators meeting, and you were saying that people call it Fitna Cafe, which is like, you know what I mean? So just like clearing the air about like what is Kahwa, like the different departments, like the coffee aspect, and then the like the programming aspect, and just going a little bit deeper into that.
Yeah. The Fitna Cafe page, by the way, the Instagram, brilliant. It was hilarious. Like, I liked like every meme. Unfortunately, I got taken down. I did not have anything to do with that. I promise. I thought it was hilarious. But so with Kahwa, also, we're not Kahwa House. I know people get confused about this. There's a Kahwa House that exists in like New York and like Chicago. But we're Kahwa Cafe, but different. But the vision behind it, when they hired me, they asked me like what I wanted to do with it. And I told them that I wanted to create a space for belonging for people that do not have that in the Muslim community. So if you look at the demographic data, for example, like ISPU, Sister Dalia Mujahid, who lives across the street from Adams, I think, she did this research where she found that of Muslims 18 to 29 years old, they found that, hold on, you have to cut that out.
It was 66.
Yeah. So when we looked into this, of like who is it that's coming to the masjid and who's not, we looked into Sister Dalia Mujahid's research with ISPU, and she found that of Muslims aged 18 to 29, 96% of them have a strong affiliation with Islam, meaning that they feel very close to it and they feel very tied to it, which is something, I forget the exact terminology she used, but that was very surprising to me. Like me, like growing up in this area, also like growing up within a lot of Muslim friends and seeing the Muslim community at large, it's very surprising that 96% of people, 18 to 29, like, or like very, I forget what the terminology she used, like is close to Islam, belongs to Islam, affiliates themselves with Islam, something along the lines of like they're very close to it. And that demographic is even split to like 60% said they're like very close to Islam, and like 30% said like they're kind of close, but 96% total said they're close. Like they want to be affiliated to Islam. But within that, when you look at attendance rate, only 30% of that demographic, ages 18 to 29, come to the masjid regularly. And that regularly means once a week. Yeah. And that includes Jummah.
Oh, wow.
So if you don't include Jummah, the rate of attendance regularly at the masjid of ages 18 to 29 is something like 3% or 5%. Oh, wow. So you have like, there's this huge gap, right? So between the 96% of people who say that they want to be close to Islam and the 30% who actually come at least to Jummah, there's this huge gap, right? 66% of people. Yeah. 66% of people, which is the majority, like a strong majority, say that they want to be close to Islam. They want to be affiliated with Muslim institutions. They want some kind of belonging within the community, but they don't have access to it. Yeah. So our goal at Kahwa was specifically targeting that demographic of people who want to belong to the Muslim community. They want community. They want like spiritual groundingness. They want a path of how to get closer to Allah. And interesting, like one time I was with Imam Sohaib Webb on a tour we did for Islamic Relief, and he told me that the number one question he gets from people is not like, why does God exist? Like, why is pain happening in the world? Why is this happening to my family? The number one question he gets is, how do I get closer to Allah? And this is amongst like everyone from not religious at all to very religious.
Yeah.
And the same thing is happening here. The same thing is happening where 96% of people want that kind of belonging. But our institutions, by and large, don't offer that, because we know how it is. Like, there's a stigma. When you walk in the door, if you're not dressed the right way, if you don't look the right way, everyone there's a certain treatment of people, right? They're like, oh, sister, you need to make sure oh, brother, like, make sure, right? There's a plan of policing that happens immediately. So what we wanted to do is really intentionally create a space that's an entry point to the Muslim community. It's an entry point. It's not necessarily like, okay, when you come dressed as you are, living how you are, that's it, you're great, we're perfect, like, we love you, and to stay that way. No, it's an entry point.
Yeah.
When people enter in to your house, like, if you have guests coming over, what's the first thing you tell them? Do you tell them, I need you to change how you look? No, it's ridiculous. No one does that.
Yeah.
But for some reason, like, we treat people differently when they're in an institution as opposed to like when they're at your home. And for us, like, it starts with a place of loving people. Like, you really have to want for these people to be here. People who don't normally are there.
Yeah.
And that's our entire methodology at Qahwa. We're like, we're going to, Imam Zayd Shakir said this about, building these kinds of what some people call third spaces, even though this isn't a third space, it's in the masjid. He says you have to invite people to Islam as they are, to Islam as it is. So we're not compromising on Islam. We're not compromising on any aspect of it. But we still believe that in order to really invite people, to get them to where they want to be themselves, we're not telling them that you have to be this way. They themselves, the demographic data shows that they want to be in the Muslim community. They want to have association. They want community. They want spiritual guidance, right? They want answers to questions they have about life, but no one's giving to them in a format that makes sense to them, in a format that they feel is like answers their questions. And so for us, we try to create an environment that you feel welcome. That's our number one goal. Number one goal is you come into the masjid, we're going to create an environment where you feel safe, where you feel comfortable, where you feel welcome, where you feel like no one's about to harass you or judge you. And once you feel welcome, then people naturally themselves will start to progress on their journey. And I think people, unfortunately, have this really strange attitude where they're like, no, as soon as someone comes into the door, we're going to slap them with all the rules.
Yeah.
And if they don't follow those rules, then they're this and that. Like, okay, what? We believe in, like, we at Qahwa believe in all the same stuff as everyone else. We believe that prayer is, of course, farad. We believe that hijab is farad. We believe that, we don't mess around with theology. Theology is the theology of Islam. We don't mess around with any of the fundamentals or any of the principles. What we differ is, how do you get people to get to that place? Do you throw it on them? Do you force it onto them? Like, do you tell people exactly where they're allowed to sit and where they're not allowed to sit? And this is very important when it comes to women. Like, people all day and night will be completely fine with men of different types coming into the masjid. But when it's women that start to come into the masjid in droves, then people feel really uncomfortable. And they start calling it fitna cafe and stuff.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I mean, in my opinion, honestly, it's really a discomfort with women in the presence. It is what it is. Like, I think that entire like fitna cafe narrative comes from the fact that probably 60-70% of our attendees are women. And they see it in a space where they're like, there's a lack of clear like gender separation, even though every one of our events is attended by some kind of religious spiritual authority that like has guidance over the space, that we don't cross. There's no physical touching. There's boundaries are maintained, but we just cater the environment so that people feel comfortable, specifically people who don't want to come to the masjid. Now, sometimes we get a lot of pushback and people say like, a lot more conservative leaning people who like grew up in the masjid setting, people who want gender separation, will say they feel uncomfortable at our events. And I understand that, but also they're not our target demographic. Like, our target demographic is people who do not belong to the masjid and don't find belonging and we're specifically creating a very small space.
Mm-hmm.
It's like 700 square feet or something. It's not like a massive thing. That just within this 700 square feet, Adams is a massive institution.
Yeah.
It's huge. Just within that tiny space, we're going to create a room where people can come in and just feel safe and welcome and feel like they belong. And unfortunately, that has rubbed people like the wrong way because of like some lines that they feel are, we've crossed that are Islamically not viable. But we disagree. Like, I don't want to sit here and name the scholars, but like we have had several people who've attended all of our programs and they have never said anything in terms of like, you guys are doing something that's wrong or halal or makruh or even or like anything. There's like just a difference in methodology. But anyway, the point being like, we're very intentionally trying to cater an atmosphere where people, that's an entry point. Like you come into this space and you feel like, oh, okay, like I can relax. Like I feel like I can keep coming back here. I can make friends. And people treat me well, with respect, with honor. Like the program is interesting. You know what I mean? Once we've established that, the entry point, that people feel comfortable, then we can start to help people along their journey. Yeah. But you cannot do that if they're not comfortable in your space.
If they're not coming to begin with.
Yeah, if they're not coming, and once they come, they feel like they're second-class citizens, or they feel like you're talking to them like this the whole time angrily, like, or you feel like you're judging them. They're not coming back. Yeah. So like, how are you doing dawah if people aren't even coming? Or if they come, they don't like how you treat them. That's not dawah. It's just not. Like, if the Prophet ﷺ, if you look at any of his stories and examples, find me one time where he made someone really uncomfortable. Like, other than the fact that, like, obviously he's preaching towards the Meccans, and the Meccans are not very happy with his presence. Yeah. But I mean, in terms of like how he specifically said something to somebody. You know what I mean? He always had this rahmah. He had this like mercy, this gentleness, this like understanding of where people are at. And he tried to accommodate them where they are. And for some reason, we believe now that to be religious or to be conservative, be traditional means to like hit someone over the head with like hijab. It's like, no one's questioning that hijab is mandatory. No one. No one in Qahwa questions this. But how do you get a sister to that place where maybe she even thinks about it? Yeah. You don't get it by telling her that hijab is fard. You do it by like making her first feel like, first of all, we accept you. You're our sister. We love you as you are. And your family, because we as Muslims, all of us are brothers and sisters. So if you first accept them as a family, we love you. Look, this is your space. Like, you're Muslim, you belong here no matter what. Khalas. After that point, we could have a conversation about like where each other are. And that's the other thing. It's not like we're telling people. It's a conversation. They tell us about their experiences. We tell them about our experiences. And it's like a real healthy dialogue in a community setting where people actually care about each other. So I think that's a very long answer, but
but I mean, I agree with you. But I think people, the reason there's a lot of stigma around it is because it's the 700 foot, you know what I mean? But it's within the masjid, and the people are like, the people who are already going to the masjid for other reasons, they're there and they're seeing these things and they're like, oh, we're uncomfortable with this because they're at the masjid for other things, not necessarily coming to the events. Yeah, you know what I mean? And I don't think, like, I think a lot of people would be like, oh, why just do Adams? Why don't you go like another space and do it like in a third, you know what I mean? What was
third space?
Third space, where you have like another space just for your stuff instead of doing it at a masjid and things like that. And I think that's an argument for a lot of people to
but
against Qahwa and the idea of it.
I understand that, but at the same time, I don't think people realize there's a history to this. In the West, there has been a Christianization of Islam, and there has been a secularization of Islam. And these kinds of arguments come from the fact that we have a very Christian view of Islam. And I'll tell you what that means. Christianity has this very sharp secular religious split, meaning that there are certain things that are religious, and then there's certain things that are normal life. Okay? So what that means is like, when you go to school, that's normal life. When you go to work, that's normal life. When you're like out with your friends, that's normal life. When you go to the church, then you're in the religious space. Muslims don't believe this. This is a very Christian view. And yet they try to use that argument for masjids. They say, when I'm at university, it doesn't matter if I sit next to a woman. When I'm like at work, if they sit me next to a woman, it's fine. But when I'm in the masjid, I don't want to see women. It's like, why are you okay with it at university? Why are you okay with it at work? Why are you okay with it like at the shopping line? If at the shopping line there's a woman in front of you, do you like go stand next to a man? No. So I'm like, there's this double consciousness that exists within Muslims sometimes that they don't understand where that comes from. That comes from a Christian understanding of Islam, a Christian understanding of the secular religious divide. That there are certain spaces that are religious spaces and everything else is not religion. Muslims don't believe this. Muslims believe that the same way that you act now is the same way that you act everywhere else.
Yeah.
What's okay at a university is not suddenly not okay in the masjid. Now, of course, that goes without saying. The masjid is a sacred space, of course. But Muslims also believe that the whole world is a sacred place. But we specifically, again, if you look at the history of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, if you look at the way the Masjid of Medina was designed, men and women had interactions all the time. Also, there's no like barrier between men and women in the Prophet's Masjid. Many people don't know this, but it's like a lot of these things that we understand as like the way that masajid are is very modern. And it's very like, again, like a non-Islamic view of Islam. And so for us, like the ethical engagement with opposite genders has more to do with your conduct. It has more to do with the words that you say.
And your intention.
You can be across a barrier, but you can be DMing that girl on Instagram, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Which I see all the time. Like you can have this wall up between you two, but you're DMing each other on Instagram. Does that make it halal? No. Like, and you could be sitting right next to a woman in a space and you can have an ethical halal engagement with her. It's all about you, your conduct, your engagement, how you talk, how you treat people. Like, are you being sleazy? You know what I mean? The fact that you're next to a woman, that is not the problem. The problem is our intention and our mentality and our engagement and how it is that we treat one another in the world. So again, the existence of a woman is not fitna. And the fact that again, at the same time, people have a certain comfort level, like in their personality, right? They just want they want to come into a masjid and they don't want to have to think about all the problems. They deal with all these problems outside the world. They don't want to have to deal with in the masjid. And I get that. But again, you have the rest of the masjid. Like, you don't have to come to the qahwa events. Like, again, we're catering to a very specific demographic because we're trying to create a real sense of belonging and a real sense of like home for people that don't have that. And so we're trying to use that as an intro. And if you already have that, that's wonderful. We have other programs that are like gender divided. And we have other events that are completely gender divided, so we're trying to create something for everyone. Yeah. So I hope that answers your question.
No, it does. Yeah, no, this has been an absolute pleasure. And thank you for all of your insights and the stories and things like that. And I mean, honestly, this has been, if it's not for anyone else, then it's for me. I've learned a lot from this conversation, and I personally feel like I'm going to be stepping away with a lot of knowledge and a lot of better understanding on various things.
May Allah bless you in the podcast and the effort and the team over here. This man over here is doing good work.
Mashallah. He is, yeah, alhamdulillah. But yeah, as we wrap up, we have this tradition where you ask the next guest a question without knowing who the guest is.
Okay.
So the way that we do it is you pick a number between, get the sheet out. You pick a number between 1 and 49.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Some of them are
19.
deeper questions and some of them are more fun questions. 19. Okay. So you're not going to know who you're asking the question to. Okay. But the question is, what's something on your bucket list that you hope to accomplish soon?
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
So I guess you're going to have to wait for next episode to see who that guest is, as well as our listeners will have to wait to see who the guest is and what they say to that question, inshallah. But yeah, no, thank you for being here, and this has been a pleasure having you. Don't miss our next episode to find out who the guest is and what their answer is. And remember, we upload videos every Thursday at 5 p.m. on this for this podcast, and we'll see you then, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Muslim Minds. I want to take a minute and remind you to follow us on our social media on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok under the handle @DC Muslim Youth. We post inspiration, updates, and other events and programs that we'll be doing in the coming future. So make sure to follow us there to stay tuned to when we upload episodes, as well as other programs and events that we will be doing, inshallah.